Mona Signer, the President and CEO of NRMP, and thank you very much for joining us. Today, a very big day for medical students all over the country and the world, physicians around the world. So the big question is President Trump's executive immigration order kind of put this process into a lot of uncertainty this year. How has that affected the process?
Well, I think there's no question that the executive order created a lot of stress, particularly for the applicants from the countries named in the executive order. The first version of the executive order, I think, caused far more consternation than the second version, and not just because one of the countries was dropped, but because there are exceptions that may well benefit some of the applicants who are in the match. The exceptions for current visa holders, for those who are already in the country, and so I think that helped. I didn't hear any program directors, at least none told me, that they were not going to rank applicants from the countries named in the executive order. And our advice was that applicants and programs should continue to rank each other based on their true preferences for each other. Having said that, if in fact the start of training approaches July 1 and some of the applicants cannot arrive in the country, can't start training on time, then we will expedite the process for granting what we call waivers of the match commitment that essentially abrogates the match and doesn't require either the applicant or the program to fulfill their match obligations.
One of the difficulties, I think, was the timing of all this was right around the process when applicants and programs would be thinking about their rank list. I wonder if you might kind of discuss that and how that all played out.
The timing could not have been worse from the standpoint of the match because, as you point out, it did occur during the process when applicants and program directors were submitting their rank order lists. But I have not heard any program say that they were not going to rank applicants. Certainly we heard from quite a few applicants who wanted to know how they would be affected by this. In fact, we don't collect citizenship information at all during our match registration process, so we cannot even identify the applicants who are from the countries named in the executive order. The data show that fewer non-U.S. citizen students and graduates of international medical schools registered for the match this year. On the other hand, their match rate was the highest it's been in more than a decade. So I think that's a very positive sign. I can't attribute that in particular to applicants from the countries named in the executive order because, as I said, we don't collect citizenship information. But I think it is heartening that the match rate for those IMGs did rise this year.
And when you look at the match rates for them, did you see a consistent rise in the other categories as well?
The match rate for U.S. allopathic senior students rose a little bit this year, but their match rate is always around 94%, give or take a few tenths of a percentage point. The match rate for students and graduates of United States osteopathic medical schools rose this year, the highest it's ever been at just over 81%. On the other hand, the match rates for some of the other smaller categories of applicants did not rise. So, it's hard to say, but I take the fact that the match rate rose not just for non-U.S. citizen IMGs, but for IMGs who are U.S. citizens, as a positive sign. There were about 1,000 more positions in the match this year, so of course a rising tide lifts all ships. Many more positions, and so many more applicants had opportunities to match.
A lot of people will look at these results today. There will be a lot of news about this today, and people will try to make connections. What is your sense about whether any connection can be made with the results today and the immigration executive orders?
Well, I can't draw any conclusions from it. And I don't believe that anyone else can either, simply because we don't collect citizenship information. And without cross-referencing our data with those of another organization, we wouldn't know how many of the citizens from those countries obtain matches this year. So I don't think anybody can draw any conclusions other than the fact that the match rate rose for all non-U.S. citizens who attended international medical schools.
And then the other big point of interest would be how primary care fields are faring, given that IMGs typically fill a lot of those important roles. How did that turn out in this year's match?
Actually, more U.S. seniors matched to family medicine this year, and that's been a trend we've seen over the past several years. That's positive. Family medicine is one of the specialties that you can certainly say is a primary care specialty, although many people consider internal medicine to be primary care. Many internists wind up doing fellowships, and so they're not necessarily primary care physicians. They could be, but they aren't necessarily. The same is true of pediatrics. Many pediatricians practice primary care, but many also take fellowship training, and they wind up not being primary care providers. So I think the family medicine numbers, that more seniors went into family medicine this year, and that seems to be a trend, is very positive.
That's an interesting point, that U.S. Graduates are increasingly going into family medicine, and that's certainly a change from years past. What can you attribute that to?
I really can't attribute it to anything in particular, except possibly the fact that the match is getting much more competitive. The data show that the competitive specialties are filling all or nearly all of the positions in the match. Whether or not family medicine is a first choice or a safety specialty, I can't tell you yet. We have not had a chance to analyze the data that closely.
Very interesting, and really appreciate your insight today on a very important day for physicians all over the world. Mona Signer with NRMP, the President and CEO. Thank you very much for taking some time today.
Thank you.